Welcome to The Debate. Today we are stepping into a territory that really challenges the very solidity of the floor beneath your feet. We're looking at a text that claims reality isn't a place but a contract that's renewed every single second by what you choose to look at. We're dissecting the concept of egregores within the Hyper-Sothery system, specifically through a commentary from the persona Nyarlathotep.
It is a fascinating, if deeply unsettling document, and the central question we're asking is about the mechanics of our social world. Does human attention literally feed independent thought forms that then gain, control over reality? Or is this a very elaborate, almost gothic metaphor for social psychology and the modern attention economy?
Right. It really comes down to a question of agency and mechanics. The source material argues for something it calls participatory reality. And in this view, attention isn't just a resource you spend, it's a metabolic action. I'm here representing the position that this framework is describing a literal mechanical truth, that we are essentially batteries for predatory social entities, and if we don't understand the mechanics of this feeding, we just remain unconscious victims.
And I'm here to represent the view that while the attention economy is undeniably real, attributing agency and hunger and predatory intent to social trends, to call them egregores, is it's a dangerous kind of anthropomorphism. It creates a superstition out of what is basically sociology, and it risks obscuring the very human responsibility behind all of these phenomena.
I understand that hesitation, I do. It sounds like ghost stories. But let's actually look at the specific claims. You have the floor to dismantle the premise.
My issue starts with the definition of the world itself. The text claims reality is co-authored. It explicitly states, I'm quoting here, "It isn't held together by atoms. It is held together by participation." Now, as a poetic observation of society, sure, I can get on board with that. But as a statement of fact, it feels like we are drifting into solipsism.
I don't think it's solipsism. I think it's rigorous sociology just dressed in, occult language. When the text says it is held together by participation, it's talking about the intersubjective infrastructure. Things like money, borders, laws, fame, none of these exist in nature. They only exist because we all collectively agree to act as if they do. The text just takes us a step further with this concept of metabolic action, and Nyarlathotep asserts a pretty chilling maxim here. What you feed learns.
What you feed learns. I mean, it is a catchy phrase, but let's actually unpack what that means.
It describes a feedback loop. In this framework, an egregore isn't an imaginary friend. It's defined as a social predator. So, when millions of people synchronize their attention, feeding a concept with time, emotion, narrative, that concept gains a kind of continuity. My position is that we are all currently in a state of unconscious feeding. We act as fuel for brands, for political movements, for moral panics, all because we fail to grasp that our attention is a selection engine. We think we're just watching the news, but in this framework, we're actually keeping the monster alive.
I acknowledge the power of the metaphor. The idea that attention changes behavior is absolutely correct. If we all stop paying attention to a specific celebrity, their career effectively ends. They starve, in a sense. But I really struggle with the leap from that to treating these structures as independent living things. The text calls them gods or demons or hunger with a mask. If we say a political movement is a hungry ghost that wants our outrage, aren't we just externalizing the blame? We're basically saying, oh, the egregore made me do it.
I think you're looking for moral agency, where the text is describing mechanical function. It's trying to collapse the distinction between the mind and the spirit world. And it outlines a very specific biology for these things. It doesn't just say they exist, it explains how they're born through 4 stages: seed, charge, enactment, and animation.
And this structure does mirror how memes spread. I'll give you that.
It goes deeper than memes, though. Let's walk through them, because this is where that battery versus engineer distinction starts to make sense. So it starts with the seed, a symbol, a logo, a flag, a story. It's inert. Then comes charge. Emotion gets bound to it. You love the flag or you hate the logo. But the crucial shift, the really important part, is stage 3, enactment.
Enactment is the behavior, correct? The actual action.
Exactly. You repeat the slogan, you wear the jersey, you argue about it at dinner. You are building the entity with your body and your time. But then stage 4 is the animation point. And this for me is the core of the debate. The text says, before a certain threshold, you are using a symbol. After that threshold, the symbol is using you.
That is the line I wanted to challenge. The symbol is using you. That implies the symbol has a will.
It implies the symbol has a survival instinct. Once that animation point is reached, the entity becomes self-propagating. It no longer needs your belief. It only needs your participation. And participation includes rage, doom scrolling, worrying, fighting it. The text is very specific. You don't have to believe in an egregore to feed it. Once a movement or a brand hits that animation point, it begins to recruit attention on its own. It effectively farms the population for more energy.
But farms and recruits, those words are doing a lot of heavy lifting there. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that a hashtag or a political trend has a consciousness that strategizes. Isn't this just the natural selection of ideas? I mean, a fungus doesn't plan where to grow, it just follows the nutrients. Why do we need to attribute hunger and strategy to a social trend? I feel like we are just projecting our own susceptibility onto the object itself.
I'm not convinced by that dismissal because it sort of ignores emergent complexity. The text actually compares egregores to fungi explicitly. It calls them co-authored engines of belief that evolve inside your networks the way fungi evolve in wet caves. You say a fungus doesn't plan, but it acts as if it plans. It finds the most efficient route to food. And if a social algorithm, which is essentially the nervous system of a modern egregore, adjusts itself to show you exactly what makes you angry because it knows that will keep you on the platform, how is that functionally distinguishable from a predator hunting prey?
Because the algorithm was written by humans who wanted to sell ads, not by a demon who wants to eat souls.
But the result is the same. The system learns which emotions yield the most food. The agency might be emergent, sure, composed of millions of human interactions and algorithmic weights, but the result is an entity that acts with what looks like strategic intent. It optimizes for its own growth, often at our expense.
Emergent behavior, sure. Complexity theory covers that without needing the occult. But let's look at the implications of this whole predator framing. This brings us to what the text calls the law of fed gods. The text says, whatever you consistently feed becomes hungry. And it follows that with perhaps the most controversial point in the whole text. To hate an egregore is to pray to it through clenched teeth.
Opposition is devotion with a different outfit. It's a brutal assessment, yeah.
It is. And this is where I find the theory genuinely dangerous. The text argues that enemies are the greatest gift to an egregore because conflict attention is high-grade fuel. But if we follow this logic, what is the strategy? To ignore injustice? To ignore rising fascism or corporate abuse? If we starve a threat by looking away, does it just go away? Or does it thrive in the dark while we're all busy cultivating our angels?
That is the central ethical conflict. But I would frame it differently. I don't think the text advocates for ignorance. It advocates for starvation. There's a profound difference there. Ignorance is passive. Starvation is an active, strategic withdrawal of resources. The Hyper-Sothery logic is that when you engage in, rage posting or obsessive debating against a movement, you are validating its existence in the contract of reality. You're creating repetition and emotional charge. You're giving it a shape in the world.
So silence is the weapon? Is that it?
The text says, silence is not passive. Silence is a blade. If you stop debating a manufactured moral panic, if you stop sharing the outrage bait, you cut the metabolic line. The strategy is starvation combined with cultivation. You can't just remove, you must replace. You have to feed what frees. If you only fight the darkness, you become defined by it. The egregore captures you through your very opposition.
Silence is a blade sounds poetic. I'll give it that. But in a so-called participatory reality, refusing to engage with a threat might just allow it to overtake the contract of reality unchecked. I mean, if a movement creates real-world violence, and I refuse to feed it with my attention, that doesn't stop the violence. It just means I'm not looking at it. That feels like an abdication of duty, feels like privilege, not a metaphysical strategy.
But ask yourself this, does looking at it stop the violence? Or does looking at it, filming it, sharing it, and screaming about it create the very ritual structure that encourages the next act of violence? The text suggests that the media cycle itself is a ritual agreement. And by participating in the cycle of outrage, we are signing the document that says, yes, this is what reality is. We are confirming the relevance of the violence.
Okay, that leads us directly to the technology aspect. Because if we are talking about media cycles, we are really talking about the delivery mechanism. The text describes the internet as an industrial-scale summoning circle.
Precisely. This is where the theory moves from abstract philosophy to something that feels undeniably concrete. The text describes our devices as black mirrors and notifications as incense bells. It calls the algorithm a priesthood with no theology except maximize participation.
And I can't really argue with the accuracy of that description. I mean, whether you call it an egregore or engagement metrics, the mechanism is identical.
It proves the theory. We have built an infrastructure designed solely to harvest attention and convert it into ontological weight. The internet is an egregore incubation machine. It accelerates the entire process from seed to animation. It used to take centuries to build a god or a nation-state. Now, we can build a global delusion in a week, 1 billion micro-initiations per hour. We are not just sharing information, we are performing rituals that summon these entities into dominance.
I agree that social media dynamics function exactly like that. But again, I just come back to the why. Is this chaos magic, or is this just capitalism? Is there a real difference between what the text calls ontological capture and just, really effective marketing?
The difference is causality. Marketing is trying to sell you a product. Ontological capture, as it's defined in the text, is when a fiction enslaves causality.
Okay, give me an example of fiction enslaving causality.
The text lists moral panics or inevitable futures. Let's say a baseless conspiracy theory gains enough traction, enough charge and enactment. Suddenly money moves, laws change, people are harassed in the streets. Reality starts to behave as though the conspiracy were true, even if it is factually demonstrably false. That is ontological capture. The fiction has become a causal energy inside hyperreality. It's achieved a metaphysical weight that the term marketing just doesn't fully capture. It's not just that people bought a shoe, it's that the world has literally bent around a story.
That is a fair distinction. When the story starts writing the laws, the line between fake and real basically collapses. But this brings us to the practitioner's dilemma. The text presents a binary choice for the human caught in this mess. You are either a battery or an engineer.
Participatory reality means you are not innocent. That's the heavy hitter right there. Every moment of your attention is an allocation of creative power.
The battery concept is clear enough. We're the fuel. But the engineer concept, that's where I have questions. The text says your angels are also egregores. It explicitly tells us you must learn to build the gods you can live with. If we follow this instruction, aren't we just trading one set of invisible masters for another? We starve the bad egregores to feed the good ones, but we are still living in this theater of attention structures. Is true freedom even possible in this system? Or are we just choosing which monster gets to eat us?
I see this skepticism, but I think that the text argues that total freedom from attention structures is, it's impossible. We are social creatures, we live in a world of symbols. We can't step outside the contract of reality entirely. You can't live without language, culture, or shared belief. So the practitioner's dilemma isn't about escaping the system, it's about gaining agency within it. The difference between a battery and an engineer is consciousness.
So the battery just feeds automatically?
Exactly. The battery feeds whatever is put in front of them. Fear, outrage, trends, celebrity gossip. They react. The engineer, on the other hand, consciously selects.
They look at a narrative and they ask, do I want more of this to exist? If the answer is no, they withdraw. If the answer is yes, they invest. They feed what frees and starve what binds.
So it's about attention hygiene as a form of autonomy.
It's even more than hygiene. It's about responsibility. It's about recognizing that you are always making something more real. Even when you are just watching, you are voting for that reality's continuation. The engineer accepts the responsibility of that vote.
I suppose that is the most empowering and also terrifying part of the text. Do not pretend you are not the one holding the knife. It strips away the comfort of passivity. It denies us the luxury of saying, oh, I'm just observing.
It forces us to confront the fact that we are surrounded by hunger with a mask. And often, we're the ones inviting it to dinner. We complain about the state of the world, but we binge watch its decline.
I still maintain that we should be wary of viewing the world entirely through this lens of demons and feeding. It can lead to a kind of magical paranoia where we're afraid to look at anything for fear of summoning it. There's a risk of becoming so obsessed with your own attention purity that you just disconnect from the suffering of others. However, the core warning is valid. If we view our attention as a limited, creative resource rather than an infinite garbage dump, we might actually change the quality of our own lives.
And perhaps the quality of our shared reality. If we stop feeding the monsters of outrage and fear, they lose their metabolic power. They starve. And in the space they leave behind, maybe we can cultivate something else. We can build angels of community or progress or peace simply by persistently observing them into existence.
Feed what frees, starve what binds. It's a good motto, even if you don't believe in the metaphysics behind it.
I would argue the metaphysics makes the motto urgent. We've covered the mechanics of the animation point, the dangers of conflict attention, and the industrial scale of the internet summoning circles. We've looked at how we are either building our prison or our home with every single glance.
And we've debated whether this is literal spiritual warfare or a powerful metaphor for psychological resilience. I still land on psychology, but I admit the fungus analogy is going to stick with me.
To close, I want to rephrase the position one last time for our listeners. The text suggests that you think you live in a world of things, but you actually live in a world of attention structures. The most rational path, in my view, is to practice strict attention hygiene. Treat every look, every click, every moment of dwelling on a narrative as a magical act, because it is.
And from my side, while the warning against doom scrolling and rage posting is absolutely critical, we must hold onto our human agency. We are the creators of these structures, not just their food. We shouldn't let the fear of egregores paralyze us from engaging with the difficult, messy parts of reality that require our attention to fix. But we should be very careful not to confuse fixing with feeding.
A crucial distinction. The final lesson of the text rings in my ears. Do not pretend you are not the one holding the knife. Whether you see it as magic or psychology, the responsibility for what we sustain lies with us.
Indeed. We are the architects, whether we like the building or not.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the architecture of belief.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, on The Debate.